must have happened in areas like this, where Latvians were mass executed by the Germans and women that fell in their hands awaited a grim fate. It may sound like a story that occurred during the Second World War, but no, it happened in the months after the First World War. But why? Because the Germans were defeated in World War I, right? What were the Germans doing here? That is what you're going to learn today in the forgotten, savage German conquest of Latvia in 1919.
When the First World War broke out, Latvia was part of the Russian Empire. Russian forces invaded East Prussia from there, but were defeated, and by 1915 the Germans occupied much of the region. As the Russians retreated, they evacuated Riga's industries and expelled many residents, halving the city's population. Yet, the city itself remained in Russian hands. After the Russian 1917 February Revolution, the Russian Tsar abdicated and a provisional government took office. While the Russian provisional government hesitated, political conflict erupted in Riga between Bolsheviks, moderate socialists, and civic leaders. The Bolsheviks, supported by the elite Latvian Riflemen, soon gained dominance. After the October Revolution, rival factions each claimed authority, setting the stage for Latvia's future independence struggle. When the Bolsheviks and the Germans signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the whole of Latvia came in German hands. In November 1918, everything would change drastically once else. Just 2 days after the fighting in Western Europe ended, on 11th of November 1918, the Red Army, backed by Latvian Bolsheviks, launched a major offensive in the western borderlands of the former Russian Empire. Their goal was to take advantage of Germany's defeat and reclaim the territories lost under the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Meanwhile, the revolutions in Berlin, Munich, Vienna, and Budapest encouraged Lenin to believe that Bolshevism could spread westward. The situation seemed favorable. German troops were demoralized and retreating, while the new national armies in Eastern Europe were still weak. Facing little resistance, the Red Army quickly occupied Estonia and Latvia, capturing Riga on the 3rd of January 1919, and they took Vilnius in Lithuania 5 days later. With these victories, Lenin moved swiftly to spread the revolution in the newly conquered territories. Earlier, he had accepted the Brest-Litovsk Treaty to secure socialism's survival in Russia, but now, with Germany's defeat, he returned to his goal of world revolution. Bolshevik-backed governments, the Latvian and Lithuanian Soviet Republics, and the short-lived Estonian Commune of the working people in Narva implemented radical communist reforms. They seized and nationalized land and property from the middle classes and suppressed dissent with brutal violence. However, these Baltic Soviet republics did not last long. The Estonian Commune was destroyed within weeks by the Estonian People's Force, while the Latvian and Lithuanian Soviets survived only with Soviet military support. The Western Allies, lacking troops in the region, asked Germany's new government under Friedrich Ebert to delay withdrawing its forces from the Baltics. On the 29th of December 1918, shortly before Riga fell, the Latvian government, supported by the British, approved the formation of a Baltic German anti-Bolshevik militia, the Baltic Landeswehr, composed of local Germans and volunteers from Germany. See, the British didn't have strength nor the will to take on the matter themselves. Together with the remnants of the German 8th Army, these volunteers formed the Iron Division, about 16,000 men strong, led by Major Joseph Bischoff, a veteran officer who had fought in German Southwest Africa and throughout World War I. To attract more recruits, the Latvian government promised German volunteers land and settlement rights if they served at least 4 weeks against the Bolsheviks. This offer appealed to unemployed German veterans eager for purpose, adventure, or land. After the war, many volunteers inspired by old traditions of Eastern colonization joined the Freikorps, irregular paramilitary groups whose name harkened back to the wars of liberation against Napoleon. Others were drawn by the lawlessness of the Baltics, seeing themselves as soldier adventurers or mercenaries, continuing the fight against Bolshevism and the humiliation of Germany's defeat. By February 1919, thousands of Freikorps soldiers had arrived in the Baltics. Under General Rüdiger von der Goltz, who had earlier aided Finland's anti-communist white forces, about 30,000 to 40,000 men began operations against the Bolsheviks. Their campaign initially targeted Kuldiga, in German known as Goldingen, Ventspils or Windau, and Jelgava, Mitau, reclaiming the Latvian coast. Their ultimate goal was the capture of Riga. Fighting in the Baltics was chaotic and extremely brutal. There were no clear front lines, and Bolshevik fighters, including Russians, Latvians, and even former German POWs, often dressed as civilians. This blurred distinction led German troops to treat the conflict as a guerrilla war, fighting with ruthless ferocity. One volunteer recalled, "No one could be left alive." Accounts from participants, including Rudolf Höss, the future commandant of Auschwitz, described horrific violence, massacres, ambushes, and mutual atrocities. Höss wrote that in the Baltics there was hardly a front line. Wherever forces met, there was slaughter until no one remained. In Jelgava, Freikorps troops executed about 500 civilians accused of aiding the Bolsheviks, with hundreds more killed in Tukums and Daugavgrīva. Violence against civilians, once rare in conventional warfare, now became routine. Some German volunteers justified these killings as revenge for Bolshevik atrocities. One, Erich Bala, described discovering mutilated German corpses in a Latvian village. Enraged, his comrades immediately killed the 2 local women in retaliation. Such acts reflected the cycle of vengeance and dehumanization that defined the campaign. The fragile alliance between the Latvian government and the Freikorps collapsed once the Red Army was expelled. On the 16th of April 1919, after Ulmanis demanded the Germans to leave, Freikorps soldiers staged a coup, installing Pastor Andreas Nedra as a pro-German puppet leader. The Western Allies now protested and demanded the withdrawal of the Freikorps, but Berlin refused, warning that leaving would hand the region back to the Bolsheviks, unless Britain or France intervened directly. In May 1919, German forces launched a massive assault on Riga, a city already devastated by years of war and occupation. After capturing it on the 22nd of May, they carried out mass executions of alleged communists and their supporters, about 3,000 people in total. The violence targeted both men and women, especially the so-called Flintenweiber, armed female communists. The German advance soon faltered. On the 23rd of June 1919, the Battle of Wenden, or Cessus, Latvian and Estonian troops defeated the Freikorps and forced von der Goltz to sign the treaty Strasdumusa, withdrawing from Riga and restoring Ulmanis as prime minister. Yet many Freikorps soldiers refused to return to Germany. Furious at both Berlin's acceptance of the Treaty of Versailles and their battlefield defeat, about 14,000 men joined Colonel Pavel Bermont-Avala's White Russian Army of the West, continuing war in Latvia. They lived off the land, plundering a starving countryside and fueling further Latvian resistance. Eventually they were driven into Lithuania and defeated again. As they retreated, the Freikorps burned villages, murdered civilians, and left widespread destruction. One German veteran later admitted, "Our fists lashed down in destructive lust. Our achievement was destruction." Some Freikorps fighters glorified this violence and later joined far-right underground movements in Germany, participating in political assassinations during the early 1920s. One recalled, "We fired into surprise crowds and we raged. We shot and hunted. We chased the Latvians like rabbits over the field. We burned every house and destroyed every bridge and every telegraph mast. We flung the bodies into fountains and threw hand grenades on top. We slaughtered whoever fell into our hands. We burned whatever would catch fire. There were no human feelings left in our hearts. A giant smoke trail marked our path. We had set fire to the stake where we burned the laws and values of the civilized world." By late 1919, the survivors finally returned to Germany, but their brutal experiences in the Baltics helped shape the violent extremist culture that would later feed into the rise of German paramilitarism and Nazism. Learn about Lithuania during World War I by clicking here. Thanks as always for watching and best wishes.